Hello and welcome. This is Lindsay of Lindsay Lou Rogers for the Momentum Talk Show. And today I have Miles McConnell Guitarist here. You can say hello, Miles.
Hello, Lindsay, and hello, everyone.
Welcome. We're happy to have you here. So before we begin learning more about Miles and what he does and what his current thoughts are in the music world, I am going to talk with you a little bit about what momentum means and why it was started. So momentum stands for monumental opportunity manifesting extraordinary new times upon man and womankind. So it was started to share with you all some ideas and thoughts, tips and tricks, inspiration from people that I have interacted with and learned from that I thought would help the rest of you. So we are going to start learning from Miles. So Miles, why don't you tell us what you've been working on lately?
Cool. Well, thank you, Lindsay, for this invitation. It's always great speaking with you, and look forward to sharing some thoughts and ideas with some folks. So, yeah, I'm a musician. I'm a classical guitarist, and I can talk a little bit about what that means. But I've been involved with that most of my life, and I currently I'm working on in that domain, in the domain of classical guitar. I'm working on doing a bunch of arrangements, which means like I'm taking music that was either written for other instruments or maybe it's music in the pop genre or some other genre, and I'm adapting it for solo guitar, unaccompanied, no vocals, just instrumental solo guitar, played on a nylon string classical guitar. And so I'm building up my own little YouTube channel now, and that's kind of the main project that I've been doing since the pandemic began, in this time where we are limited in terms of getting out and playing live, which is really my great passion. And so, of course, it's a challenge, and not something that is preferable that we don't have that available to us during this time. But at the same time, I really feel that within challenge lies opportunity, and so this has been something that I've done some of in the past, creating new arrangements, and I've wanted to do this a lot more. And so having kind of time now available in order to devote to that has been really great for me. And I'm getting some nice responses. And it's been a journey of discovery for me, which music has always been that, actually. And I regard it as really a great adventure and a great journey of discovery. And by that, I mean a few things. I mean that, first of all, I guess when I set out and started doing arrangements, I had in mind a few songs or pieces of music that I thought this would be neat for me to play solo guitar. But as time went on, and I started completing some of those, and then I thought, well, what might be the next project? Then I kept my ears open, and I was looking for things that could work. Not everything can work on solo guitar. It is a particular medium, just like in other domains of the arts. You have certain kinds of things that can work. For example, if we think about like the world of film, sometimes filmmakers will make a mini series because the story that they're trying to tell is going to take longer than 2.5 hours. And so they need a mini series in order to do that. And so some things don't work as a film, and some things don't work as a series. And so with music and doing arrangements for guitar, it's a particular medium, and some things work and some things don't. So I've been doing a lot of solo piano music, for example, the music that was written for solo piano. Like I did for example, a bagatelle, which is a type of piece from the 19th century written by Beethoven that was written for solo piano, and I adapted that for solo guitar. But Beethoven's music, a lot of it is very heavy, very thick, very dramatic. And that doesn't always translate so well to the guitar because the guitar has a much smaller sonority than the piano, meaning that the piano is much bigger, much more resonant. It has 88 keys. You're using 10 individual fingers. So it has a wider range and depth of sound than the guitar. Now the guitar has its own power and it has a kind of level of intimacy that you don't quite get with the piano. So again, it's just a different medium. It's just a different world. And so anyway, these are kind of the inside baseball kinds of things that, one thinks about in the act of creation and of a recreation, I guess, in this case. And so that's been something that I've been working on, and I'm working on a pop song now that I'm on the verge of being ready to make a video for, and it's just a song that kind of just spoke to me, and I thought that it would work well on the guitar. And another thing that I've been thinking about in relation to that, about kind of those folks out there who are creative individuals and maybe who do something in the arts or another creative domain may relate to this, and even those who maybe have an interest in it but are not necessarily artistic or creative will maybe still be able to relate that so many times in life, I think, things call to us and we have to answer the call. And it's the old thing that the Greeks talked about the muse, really. And there's this great interview with John Williams, the film composer, where he talks about how you don't court the muse, she sort of courts you, and then you take her and dance with her. And so it's kind of this really interesting thing where sometimes I feel like I hear a song or a piece of music and it grabs me, and then I hear it again and I hear it again, and then I go looking for it in a way. And it's almost like a dance between the muse or this particular piece of art or music, that I feel like it's a right fit for me, and it has something to do with the larger vision of what I hope to be able to communicate and create and share. And so those are some of the things, I guess, that have been kind of on my mind and heart and in the works of late. And I hope that makes sense. I know some of that's maybe a little bit kind of talking shop here, so I hope that it's not a little too maybe esoteric. But I hope to be able to, in this conversation, to touch on, I guess, some of the different ways in which music has helped to shape my life, and the lessons, I guess, that I would have to share with others about that, and the ways in which we can have this spirit of adventure, discovery, journey in our lives in many different ways. And I've had it largely in music, but also outside of music, of course. And how, that I have stumbled across and found so many interesting and wonderful opportunities and all of that as a result of just kind of this spirit of I've got my training, I've got this background, and yet I have goals, certainly, and I'm a very goal-oriented person, which is good, but can also has its shadow side. But that I'm also open. And so this balance of kind of having goals, having things you're working towards, and also a sense of I'm not sure where this is going to take me, but there's an aliveness in that, which I think is very important.
Yeah, not being attached to the outcome. Yeah, that's great. You mentioned this wilderness period, and I think you touched on what it means, but maybe you didn't name it. So I think maybe if you want to just go there for a moment, that'd be great to hear.
Yeah, that's right. So we had a little conversation about a week ago before this interview, just kind of chatting about some of the things that we might talk about. And so we're talking now in October of 2020, and most of this year we have been all over the world. People have been in a lockdown or semi-lockdown, period of quarantine, a period of limited opportunities in terms of the normal kind of activities that we were doing prior to this pandemic. And there's been a lot of obviously great challenge in that, and suffering even in that, for many people. And at the same time, there can be, if we're a little bit lucky and a little bit creative and open, can be some interesting opportunities. But it is a kind of, I feel for myself, at least personally, a kind of wilderness period. So that's a phrase really that pops up kind of again and again throughout history, throughout mythology, throughout world religions. And so some maybe will be familiar with, of course, the 40 years in the desert in the Old Testament, the 40 days of Christ in the desert in the New Testament, and this period of kind of wilderness and a kind of, in some ways, isolation, but in another way, hopefully trying maybe in some ways to get deeper in touch with ourselves and with something bigger in the midst of this seeming desolation. And that's what this period feels like to me, that we have to find ways to look for positive new avenues and opportunities, both right now and also things that are maybe like planting seeds for the future. So that's again where I talk about kind of this idea of like what I've been doing is I'm starting to do some new new projects with the guitar, where I'm not really able to do other things that I really would like to do and hope to do again. But what can I do? And it's a kind of, it can be a deep dive, I guess, in a way of like where it kind of really, because we've got in some ways extra time. I feel actually really busy right now. I don't necessarily feel any less busy, but it's a different kind of busy. And I think that's good. Of course, it's also good to, I don't want to get into this kind of mindset or convey to people that like you should just be grinding it 24/7, hustle, hustle, hustle. Like it's working on projects, it's working on yourself, it's finding things that you can do that maybe you've put off before or wanted to do, or looking for new avenues. Yes, and also finding time for rejuvenation and leisure. Those things are important for us to be healthy. So it's not either or, but it also I don't want to sound too snobbish or something by saying this, but I or holier than thou, because I don't feel that way certainly, but I will say that I've been thinking about this time in relation to boredom, and that word really is not part of my vocabulary. And I'm not saying it's bad, but I don't think it's good for very long or for very much, because there's always something we can do. We can read, we can connect with people that we haven't connected with for a while. We can even find ways, even though it's definitely challenging, we can even find ways of connecting with new people now. Of course, the technology that we have now affords us this opportunity to connect in ways that, we would not have had if this pandemic had happened 10, 15 years ago. Being able to do these video chats from all across the world, it is a blessing. We also have to be present to where we are physically in our own place and not get too detached from that. But there's a lot of good to be found, and if you can kind of look for that, keep your mind on those things. So that's what I'm trying to do a little bit.
Yeah, you actually called it this interesting blend of challenge and opportunity.
It is, right? And so again, if we look at like mythology and these kind of like archetypes that recur throughout history, you see the hero's journey, for example, is something that's talked about sometimes, and that is oftentimes, whether you look at novels or films or poetry, you'll see there's a leaving home, and it's usually leaving a comfortable existence. So if you think about, like Lord of the Rings, leaving the Shire, or Star Wars, leaving the desert planet and going out and going into the unknown and discovering new things and new challenges, and that's, I think that's really important for growth and for development. And I don't want to at all say that that's easy, because that's by definition it is very difficult. And and a lot of times in these stories, the protagonist is forced into these situations. It's not a choice. And so that's kind of where we find ourselves, is like we're forced into this situation now where we have limits of travel, of gatherings, etc. But at the same time, what can we do? So it means that we either, depending on our situation, we're either spending a lot of time alone, or we're spending a lot of time with our family, or someone close to us who we live with, or what have you. And we have to face that. So you have to face that relationship with yourself or with those who are immediately close to you. And you have to a degree, embrace the things that are good and that are working, and confront those things that are maybe limiting your growth or the growth of a relationship. And so how can we do that? And these are questions that I certainly don't have all the answers for. But it's okay to sit in questions like this, and it's good. I think it's good to do that. And so sitting in questions of this, and trying new things. This is a great opportunity to try new things as so some folks out there will be people who maybe in the past have played a musical instrument or sung, and maybe already, being over half a year into this, they have maybe picked that instrument back up or started to sing again. Or maybe, I have a friend who recently decided he was going to learn how to play the harmonica. So he is somebody who sings, has sung in choirs in the past, but that's not really something that's completely available. Although people are finding a way with that too. There are virtual choirs now and things like that. So it's looking for these opportunities, but maybe try something new during this time. Learn how to cook. That's something I like to get a bit better at, as well. Learn an artistic skill or begin down a path. Doing physical activities maybe that we've put off. I'm also trying to do that, get more in shape. And there's just all kinds of things that we can do now because we're kind of forced into the situation where we've got like these parameters. But parameters are not always bad, for sure. And in art, you often work within parameters, and then you kind of sometimes will color outside of the lines, but the lines still often exist. And sometimes in art, the lines will be broken down, but that usually can't be sustained for too long. So for example, I know that maybe sounds really abstract, but if we think about like the common pop song, it's usually got a structure of something like maybe it has an intro section, instrumental perhaps, then it's got like a couple of verses, then it's got a chorus, then it goes back to the verse, maybe it has a section that we call a bridge, and then it goes back to another verse and another chorus or something like that. Or there are these various ways of structuring a song into different sections, okay? And this is something that has existed really forever and across different cultures. There are different kinds of musical forms that have existed, and they're played with, and over time they're stretched and they're bent and they are manipulated. But usually even the lack of structure arguably can be a structure, and we look at that with like abstract painting and things like that. And I'm not an expert in that by any means, but even if you look at like a Jackson Pollock where the paint is being thrown at the canvas, maybe even in that sort of seeming chaos, there is a kind of order. So, and even then, he's still limiting himself to, I'm working on a canvas. I've got a limited palette of paint. And so, we have to be very creative and innovative and about what we can do with what we have, and be curious as well. Curiosity is, I think, a wonderful thing, and so if you can stay curious, who knows what we can learn and discover.
That was wonderful. I think that will inspire lots of people to try new things or pick up old hobbies or things they have always wanted to do during this time, and also maybe relax into the structure that has been placed on them versus fight against it. You talked about this spiritual side of being an artist and wrestling with the ego. I'm not sure if you want to touch on that, but that could be our next segue into conversation here. Or
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah, no, that's great. We chatted about this a little bit too recently. So, I think people will be able to relate, I hope, to this, in that whether you are a person who has dedicated a significant amount of your life to a particular discipline, as I have, and as you have, Lindsay, with dance and with yoga and with spirituality, so whether or not you've dedicated yourself to something like a sport or an art form, or any other discipline, or whether you have just been a person who's been you know, finding, I guess, some value in relationships, in travel, in hobbies, and in any manner of things that we all do. Um, you know, there comes a point where you we ultimately we have to deal with ourselves. And I think in many ways that our life's journey is one of trying to move towards embracing all of who we are and striving to be, it's kind of cliche, but it's true, striving to be the best version of ourselves. And but also forgiving ourselves for our mistakes and our shortcomings, and we all have them. And my journey with music has been an interesting one in this sense because, as I mentioned before, I love to perform. This is my favorite part of music, is playing the guitar for people live. And I actually like playing when it's a good sized crowd, or when somehow the stakes feel a little high. I like that, I guess, adrenaline rush. I don't really, because I have played the guitar since I was a small child and I've been performing since that time, I seldom really feel nervous. I do get kind of excited, and I just love it. It's, for me, it's like, I imagine, I don't really know, but I imagine it's like a surfer who seeks out big waves, or somebody who climbs mountains or skydives. Like, there is a bit of a, like, I feel like I'm riding a wave in a way if I get into a good groove. And, maybe you probably are familiar with the term flow state, this kind of sense that we have that you're kind of letting go of your intellect in a sense, and you're going by the preparation that you have put in, and by your intuition, and by your wits and your guts, and you're really living in the moment. That's to me, that's what I'm trying to do when I play live. And I have moments where I feel that, not as much as I'd like to. You also get into it's something that doesn't feel 100%, but you still strive for that. And if you kind of keep your focus on that, you can achieve it, a feeling of it, I think, a good deal of the time. So that's something that I kind of work on. But I had to learn this, kind of the hard way a few years ago, I guess, by just having performances sometimes that didn't go great, because I think I was too focused on myself and thinking about how I guess my performance was being thought of and evaluated, et cetera, et cetera. And I was placing too much value and importance on me, and not enough on the act of creation and sharing, and living inside the music, and almost trying to be one with the music. The poet T.S. Eliot has this great line: "You are the music while the music lasts." And this goes beyond playing music. This is a metaphor for life. And so it's about presence, and it's about making the focus something bigger than ourselves. And and I do a lot of solo guitar playing. I also do collaboration with other musicians, of course, which I love to talk briefly at least about that, because that's another kind of creation that is awesome. And and that act of collaboration with another, you know, is an infusion of another kind of energy that is really just adds a whole other dimension, I think, to everything that we do. So I can talk a little bit more about that at some point, perhaps. But when I'm playing solo guitar, I still actually, and I think I picked this up from Yo-Yo Ma, I think, at one point. I heard him say that he, like, if he's playing solo Bach cello suites, that he's actually still thinking about it as a collaboration. It is a collaboration between him and Bach, who wrote the music. It is a collaboration between him and Stradivarius, or whoever made his cello. It is a collaboration between him and the audience. And so it is never just us, because we are interconnected. We are the social animal, and we even when we do something that seems solitary, we're still, you know, to use that old phrase, you know, standing on the shoulders of giants. We are connected. Whether or not you know it, it's better to try to remember it and know it. But whether or not you do, we are. And so, and that can become the beginning of a letting go or an easing away from the ego, if you can begin to make your focus, I guess, a bit bigger, I would say. So these are some of the things that I have been working on and thinking about in regards to, I guess, you know, you call this kind of inner game type of stuff in a way, in terms of performance with music. But again, I think it can definitely apply, I hope, to many aspects of life for many different people.
I think that was great. So you did touch on this connection between wrestling with the ego, and then from there, I'd kind of like you to go one of two directions you can choose. One is going to be you being the vessel, which you got there close with this connection, and there was another. Maybe the vessel is the one.
Yeah.
Intellectual and physical. So the idea of solitary work. So I'll let you choose. Maybe you can segue from one to the next.
Yes. So, yeah, it's all related to kind of what I was just talking about, but to kind of, yeah, connect it to that and expand just a little bit more on it. When I am playing a piece of music, I'm the messenger of that music. I am even if it's something that I've written, and I do write a little bit. I mostly play other people's music at this point, but but sometimes they're my arrangements, or sometimes it's music arranged by others, or sometimes it's music originally written for my instrument. But either way, I'm really, in a lot of ways, I think of myself almost like the way an actor, I think, will think of themselves, as they are trying to kind of become that character that they're playing. And something else kind of takes over. So they're kind of letting go of themselves to a degree. And it's not complete, because you also want to value, it's a little bit of both, because you also want to believe in yourself and trust yourself to know that I have something to add to this. But yes, I am kind of the vessel of this message, and whatever the message is of the music, if it's just a light piece that's fun and kind of helps people to just feel good and escape into that world for a few minutes, or if it's kind of a more serious thing that's got maybe a deeper, heavier, more profound message, whatever it is, or anything in between, it's that I'm helping to kind of create this world, but I'm also just letting it kind of happen through me in a sense. So yes, there is that. And in terms of the solitary aspect of music making, I mean, it's again a challenge and an opportunity. So I kind of talked already about the opportunity of it and how I almost even I have begun in recent years to think about even solo guitar playing as collaboration in the ways that I talked about. But the really hard work, of course, is and this is the thing that anybody who is devoted to any discipline, somewhat or very seriously, will know that the the real work is done before we walk onto the stage. Um, and in fact, that's really the being on the stage again for me is the fun part, is just the letting go and letting it happen. And you've done what you need to do, and then you just kind of let it happen. But the grueling, difficult part is that part, if it's a collaboration, it's a different kind of challenge, because then you have to um, reconcile sometimes your vision with the vision of another, and you have to sometimes compromise, and you have to listen, and you have to communicate, and because I have played in a number of duos over the years, which can be a very intimate kind of relationship with another person. And all those things that I just mentioned are key. And this is why bands break up, right? Just like why couples break up, because there's a lot. It's really, you have to be very vulnerable, and you also have to be very respectful. And you also, as I said, it's a balance between, yes, you have to be compromising in some ways and also uncompromising in others, in terms of not compromising your own values. So it can be a different kind of challenge, this idea of collaboration. But in terms of the solitary type of music making, again, the challenge often is just the long hours spent kind of with yourself and this thing, and coming up against your own limitations. And that's where the ego rears its head, and you have to have a long view. And the German poet Goethe said, "Do not hurry, do not rest." And so this idea of it is a continuous journey, and you take it step by step, and you kind of, another cliche, but trust the process, embrace the path itself, not just the pinnacle. And because even when you reach the pinnacle, then okay, great, and now where do we go from here? And that's, like Steve Jobs talked about that, do something great, and then as soon as you do it, say, okay, now what, kind of a thing. And this is what keeps us energized and growing.
Yeah, that's really great. I think that really comes to this concept of living in the moment and having a goal and not stopping at that. And I think that's a great lead into Pepe Romero's inhabiting the guitar. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so Pepe Romero is one of many kind of luminaries in the classical guitar world. And let me just briefly kind of share with those listeners and viewers of this conversation who maybe are not familiar with classical guitar. So classical guitar is both a genre, I guess, an instrument, and a tradition. So everyone knows the guitar, but there are many different kinds of guitars, right? And everyone listening will probably know that you hear the guitar in many different kinds of music. So we have, of course, in rock and roll, country, blues, various kinds of world music, and many genres all over the world. But it actually does have also a strong tradition within Western classical music in coming out of Europe, dating back really. I mean, plucked stringed instruments actually have existed since ancient Greece, and there were lutes, which are like kind of like guitars, but they have like a pear-shaped body, and those existed as far back as the Middle Ages into the Renaissance period, like mid 15th century. And by the time we get to what we call the Baroque period, like the 16th century, there are kinds of guitars now in Europe. And so there were composers, which is just a word for someone who writes music, like a songwriter, but it might not be a song, it might be a symphony, or it might be a piano sonata. And so there were composers who wrote music for the guitar in that period of the Baroque, all the way up until the present day, who are trained in this classical tradition. And a lot of the classical guitar, well, the guitar in general, but the classical guitar's roots are in Spain. Of course, there's a rich folk tradition known as flamenco that comes out of Spain, which kind of intersects a little bit with classical guitar. But it's its own tradition, and classical guitar is its own tradition. And it's also a technique. So we use there's a genre of guitar playing called fingerstyle, which means rather than playing the guitar with a pick, we play with the fingers of the right hand. This is true in classical guitar, as well as, again, fingerstyle, other styles of guitar playing. And we also use a nylon string guitar as opposed to a steel string. So the sound of the instrument, because of the different strings, is a little bit different. And also because the nylon strings are, they will put less tension on the instrument when they are tied to it. The internal construction of the instrument is a bit different. So under the top of a guitar, you have a system of braces. And that bracing system for a steel string guitar is a different bracing system because it has to withhold more tension than a nylon string. So that's a lot of really talking shop again and inside stuff, but that's just to say that the instrument itself is again, it's tuned the same as an electric guitar or as a steel string acoustic guitar, but it does have these qualities that set it apart. And it's got this tradition that goes back actually many centuries, and they're composers writing today for it as well. And Pepe Romero is one of a number of great figures, and he's still living and still active. He's in his 70s now, and he's done a couple of great concerts during the pandemic, including a concert from the Alhambra in Granada, Spain, which is quite a remarkable place, and also quite a remarkable thing that he was able to do that during this time. But I was fortunate enough to do a couple of consecutive summer workshops with Maestro Romero, and he's kind of an all-encompassing teacher, in that he will teach the very critical aspects of technique that are necessary in order to get to kind of a certain level in order to be able to play this kind of music. So, I mean, in other words, finger exercises and things like that, all the way from that, all the way to looking at a piece of music and going in and preparing a piece of music, playing it for him, and having him kind of dissect it and talk about both the technical aspects and the expressive aspects, and how to get more out of all of those. And to then, he will also talk about kind of the more mystical aspects of music making, and the more romantic aspects, and the more of the communicative side. And so one great lesson that I had with him, and I shared this with you in our earlier conversation, Lindsay, is that he had me pay attention to the parts of my body that were touching the guitar. So the way we sit in classical guitar is we have the guitar kind of angled, and it's resting on the right leg. Sometimes it can be resting on the left leg, sometimes not, depending on the particular way in which the player is sitting and using it. And of course both hands, and it's resting on the chest near the heart. And he had me pay attention to the sensation of the vibration of the guitar when I struck a note or a chord throughout my body, and then feeling it kind of in my head and feeling it throughout my body, and then kind of having this, working on this kind of then outward sharing of this vibration. And so this was a really kind of extraordinary and just a different new way for me. I've experienced this kind of subconsciously for years playing the guitar, but I hadn't had my intention focused on that so much. And so to do that was really meaningful. And again, that just comes down to attention and to presence, and how in a way simple these things are, but also how important and profound they can be.
It sounds like you really got to embody the music.
That's the goal. That's the goal, because and with classical music, it can be very heady. It can be very cerebral. And in our formal training, we study music theory, we study harmony, we study, and with playing an instrument in the classical tradition, there's a lot of technical stuff, which is physical, but is also very cerebral and very intellectual. But I've always also had a very intuitive side as a player, and so to be able to kind of very consciously connect those, and yes, to try to again to kind of become the music, to embody, and this is so critical in so many aspects of our lives now. And it's tricky now again with this time that we live in, but again, there's, I think, real opportunity. So, the internet has given us a lot, and we have access to really infinite information at this point, and that's a great blessing, but there is another side of it, which is that we can become so information centered and so in our heads, and then we almost, there becomes a disconnect. And that's the flip side of even connecting this way, still behind a screen. It's of course it's still not the same as connecting with another person in 3D. And so music has been my one big way for me, not the only way, but one big way to practice connecting mind to body. Because of course, when we listen to music, we process it through our ears and through our brains, but I think most people here will have listened to a song and have been moved by it, maybe moved to tears, maybe revved up. You got perhaps your workout playlist that gets you kind of hyped and really feeling ready to take on the world, and has got your adrenaline going, like with a thumping bass line or whatever it is. So there, music can offer this to us, and that's a great gift. But we may have to think consciously about this in order to really receive the gifts that are there. So one way that, I don't know if we can talk about intentional listening to music. I'd like to talk about that. We could talk about that now, or if you'd like to talk about something else first, we can. But intentionally listening to music is certainly one way in which we can begin to connect mind to body.
That's true. Yeah. So we can talk about that. I don't know if this relates at all, but you mentioned Daniel and this
Yeah,
music. That's okay. You want to mention that quick?
yeah. So there's one of the really great musicians of the last 50 some years, and also great ambassadors of classical music is Daniel Barenboim. He's a pianist and conductor of orchestras, and he was the husband of the great late great Jacqueline Dupre before her unfortunate death at a young age. Um, but uh, but Maestro Barenboim, you know, he's been a great thinker on music and a great um, proponent of the um, I guess possibilities of music and how it can bring people together. And but yeah, he talks about music as sonorous air. So it's like actually when we play music or sing or um, have music playing, it it takes over the space, right? And I think about this a lot when I play the guitar. My preference as a performer actually is to play the guitar in a small enough um, space, like a small recital hall or a church, where I don't actually have to amplify the guitar, and I can play unamplified and have the guitar resonate in the acoustic space and try to fill the space with the sound of the instrument and the vibrations, and let it sort of I often think about envisioning the furthest corner of a room from where I am and aiming the sound there in a way. And so that I'm really trying to kind of create something in the air. And I think that's partly what Maestro Barenboim is talking about, this idea of music as sonorous air. So just of the air now filled with sound. That's really just all that is. So then if that's the case, then okay, well, it's already something now beyond just the mind.
Is an embodiment. So you're not only embodying the music as you play with the instrument or the composer and becoming the vessel to portray that to others, you're also creating this embodied experience for the listener. And so that's actually, I'll just speak to my experience a little bit about intentional listening. And actually, what I wrote, I just wanted to go back to how I felt immediately after listening to the first composition or piece you recommended. I said, it's a full body, all encompassing experience. It was like I was floating, lots of emotions and very angelic. And so you really did a great job. And I'd love for you to share that with the audience, and I can list them out loud about texture and rhythm and these recommendations of how to listen. And it's very detailed, and it's great for people to really break it down and think about those things. And I'd love for you to, in addition, talk about this concept of music as background noise.
Right. Great. Well, thank you for all of that. And yeah, let me actually take a little bit of a step back, perhaps momentarily, just to say that we are, as you said, music is background noise. We are surrounded by music today, and you go into any shop, any restaurant, um, and there's music playing, and it's sort of always there, and it's in the background, um, and 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 that's fine. There's really nothing wrong with that, but we do experience something different by just the act of listening. And again, there's I guess different levels of it, right? Because there's the kind of music playing in the shop, and then we're putting on something that we like to listen to in the car, or while we're doing a jog, or while we're doing things around the house. But it's still kind of, so maybe it's like we've chosen and we are kind of listening to it, but it's still kind of there. Or even I was thinking about this just today too, like, like back in the 80s when MTV first came out, like there was a lot of, and when they were playing music videos, there was a big kind of critical pushback against the thing of music videos, of like having like a whole nother medium now going along with a track or with a song. And I think since then people have definitely kind of become, okay, this is a kind of artistic medium within itself, the music video, right? But there's a different experience even if you watch a music video and if you just listen to that song without the music video, like it's a different experience. Or the same thing with like watching a film, and there's the score or a song in the film comes up, and so there's all these kind of like different ways to listen. But one thing that I think has been kind of lost, that I think we used to do as a culture, as a society, is just listen. Just listen. And just put a record on and not do anything else but listen. And this can be a great practice and something pleasurable and fun, and also I think enriching somehow to our lives. And so we kind of started talking about this, Lindsay, recently, and I recommend people to try this. And so I recommended that you try this, and you're a very musical person already, and music is an important part of your life, music and dance. And but now listening to different music and listening to music in a different way, becomes, now a kind of multi-dimensional in a different way than it is when you're hearing music in a different context, aside from this kind of focused listening. So, there used to be even, and this has sort of come back a little bit, but not, but I don't think it will ever come back to where it was, and that's okay. We're in a different time, and I'm not one of these people who really kind of just thinks about the good old days the way it used to be. But they're both, but there are good things from the past that we can learn from, and we can also embrace what we have now at the same time. But back when LPs and vinyl records were the primary way to have music, that was actually a bit of a ritual. And so you have that, you go to the record shop and you sift through the LPs, and you pick something out and you bring it home, and you take the record out of the sleeve and you place it on the record player, and you put the needle on, and there's a tactile, sensual aspect to this, and then you sit and listen, and maybe you have a glass of wine, or maybe you lie on the floor and listen to this album, and maybe you read the liner notes, or maybe you read the lyrics if you're listening to vocal music along as you do this, and it becomes an experience. And we can do this today, certainly we have now these streaming services where we have an immense catalog that we'll never be able to even really get close to listening to the majority of what's available. But we have so much available to us, and it can be overwhelming. And sort of, how do you start? There's a really cool book that I like called Every Song Ever, and it's written by a New York Times jazz critic, Ben Ratliff. And I think the subtitle is something like "Listening to Music in a World of Plenty" or something like that. And it's interesting. He kind of gives you ways to find music, and also ways of categorizing music beyond genre. So he has like a chapter on slowness, and then he looks at like music in many different styles that are slow, and then he'll look at like repetition, and he'll look at repetitive music in many different kinds of genres. So it's a kind of different way. We often still think in terms of like jazz, country music, hip hop, rock, and that's, but then a lot of people now we're also listening to these different things, and that's great too. So, I guess I think we're all kind of starting less and less to starting to think a little bit less and less in terms of these genre delineations, but then how can we also categorize and group music? So that's kind of what his book is a little bit about, but he gives you some playlists and gives the reader kind of some really good starting points and ways to kind of find and discover new things. So it's a cool book in that regard. But yeah, anyway, I think that, what you said about your experience, what you shared there, Lindsay. So I suggested, you asked me for a few suggestions, and I kind of wrote a rather lengthy email about kind of some ideas about intentional listening. And, I did stress this, that the important thing is almost more how you listen than what you listen to. I mean, it is important what, and that you have kind of, that you're open, and that you are mostly open to different styles, different traditions. I have a voracious musical appetite. And so I'm always kind of in a mode of course, I have my favorites that I come back to year after year. But I also, I'm kind of always looking for the next thing at the same time. And I kind of can never get enough, insatiable. And so it's just kind of this idea of journey and this idea of discovery. But so I gave you a few different suggestions of things to listen to, and the track you listened to that you just shared about was actually a piece by Josquin des Prez, composer from the 15th century, I believe, a Renaissance period in Europe, Franco-Flemish, and this was Ave Maristella, a Latin hymn, and in voices, and it is this kind of ethereal sound to me that is definitely takes you to a different place, and that's the thrilling part of this, and the exciting part, and the kind of part of it that, again, it's enriching because it adds something to our lives that maybe we didn't quite have before, and it also taps into something that maybe is within ourselves already that we didn't know was there. So like one thing I get a kick out of is there's a number of YouTubers, of course, who would do like reaction videos. And I found there's these two guys who are like young hip hop fans. And they do this thing where I guess people send them sort of suggestions, and they do reactions to listening to stuff. But they did one video where it was Luciano Pavarotti, the great opera tenor, singing Nessun Dorma, an famous opera piece, and these guys are like moved to tears by listening to this music from like a totally different kind of style than they've ever heard before, and it's just like really amazing because that just shows that there's something that we are connected to. And somebody said, it might have been Baron Boyd, I'm not sure, but somebody said that music is not a universal language. That cliche is that music is a universal language. It's not a universal language, but it is universal. So, and I don't know, that maybe is just semantics. I think what he's saying there is simply that like there are all these different traditions. It's like languages in a way. But yet the difference between spoken language and musical language is that you don't really have to be well versed in it to be able to connect to it. It can help. It can help if you spend a little more time listening to a particular style of music. You're gonna understand it a bit more but there are some things that just seem to cut through that even, you know, and that's an example of that. And I think that just goes to the heart of our interconnectedness as humans, and that, you know, music expresses things that words alone cannot. Music is very mysterious, actually, even though, you know, those of us with formal training, like there's many different boxes that we tick of, like, I learn about this aspect, and there's many, in many different styles and genres, there's many things like that to learn to become well versed in it. But it is infinite, and and I think it's all about connecting people, and that's something that you can't quite ever get your finger on exactly. So anyway, uh, those are a few thoughts.
I think that's why people understand it, because it's meant for connection. And so if it were too complicated to connect with people for them to have a feeling, I mean, it's really an expression of emotion. I might be wrong on that, but when people are receiving it, that's how they're receiving the feeling. They don't need to have all the training per se. But I want you to talk about you being a ham and tell us about your first performance before we get too far down the road here.
Okay. Well, you know, that comment and that thought actually came born out of, so I uh, belong to a group here in Madison, Wisconsin, the Madison Classical Guitar Society, which is basically just a group of classical guitar players and enthusiasts, from amateur to professional. And I remember, at one of our events, some time ago before the pandemic, uh, you know, we have some events where, guitarists of all levels can come and perform, and having a conversation with a woman who's an amateur guitarist, actually quite accomplished already after playing for a few years, but an amateur, and she was quite nervous and had a bit of, you know, stage fright. And I sort of jokingly told her, well, you know, your problem is that you're just not enough of a ham, that this is why you have stage fright. And I mean, I meant it sincerely, and also as a bit of a joke, but because I feel that that's what I kind of it certainly was in my younger years as a kid and an adolescent, and even still to a degree I am. Like you know, I mean, we've got home videos of me at like age 5. I would, you know, dress like I used to, as a kid. I love John Wayne movies, so I would dress up as a cowboy, or I was in, you know, I grew up in the 80s, so I had like I was a big Karate Kid fan, and I had like the Daniel-san bandana with the white and black, and I would put that on and come out and play guitar, and my parents would video it, and they would have guests over and things like that, and I would bow and sort of make a big production out of it, and this kind of thing, and I think a lot of that has actually stuck with me. But I think there's an important aspect of that, which is actually just play, which is really important. This and you know, we talk about, we, you know, we say we play music because it is play. It really is. And what does that word play mean? Wow, what a question. Well, it's fun. It should be fun ultimately. Even if we're communicating something sad or serious or somber, there's still an element of play, I think. And so, you know, I think that whatever we do, we never want to completely lose a sense of play in our lives. I think that's really, really important. You know, we live in serious, challenging times, but it doesn't mean that we can't find joy and we can't find play. We should do that. And so I think this idea of kind of being a ham and kind of liking the play aspect and liking the performance and the show of it in a way and reveling in that, is important. I mean, yeah, it can tip over into something that becomes too self-indulgent. I think I've had to learn how to balance that out, rein that in, over the years, you know. But I hope that I don't lose that sense of, mostly of just of play and kind of delighting in 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 making music and in sharing it. I think that's ultimately what it has become for me, is that I'm excited about what I'm doing, and I'm excited to share it with who's ever willing to listen. And that's kind of what it really is all about for me. It's like there's a great jazz guitarist named Pat Metheny, and he said, like, I play music to please my inner fan, which is great. It's like, ultimately, whatever you do in life, do it because you like it, and hopefully also you'll find other people who like it. It doesn't have to be a lot of people. Field of dreams, if you build it, they will come. Build it with dedication, build it with heart, build it with a sense of play. They will come.
That is a great final sentence. That was great. Yeah, I think that's what people are dedicated to what they do. So it was so great to have you today, Miles. We learned a lot. I think a lot of people could watch this a few times and they can learn more about music and the guitar itself and how you got started. And maybe some of them will start intentional listening. That would be great. So any last words before we wrap up here?
Gosh, just thank you very much, Lindsay. It's been a pleasure, and well wishes to everyone out there. And yeah, just move forward with a sense of exploration and optimism and hope.
Very good. Okay, it was great to have you. Thank you so much, Miles.
Thank you.